I have a particular thing that bugs me, and it's this phrase that a lot of people use called thinking out of the box. When we start to think about it, which box are we talking about? Okay? Because you start off and your parents put you into one box. How many parents have told their children, you are going to be a doctor, you are going to be a lawyer? All their failures are now pushed onto their children. You will do what I couldn't or didn't do. Then we go to school, and we have teachers that do the same thing. We go to universities that do the same thing. Everything we do, everything we belong to, is based upon somebody putting you into a box, a whole lot of constraints. Where's Mr. Buckland? He's one man I can tell you who I would love to have been one of his students, because he doesn't put you into a box. He's trying to jag you out screaming. Okay. But it's so constraining, and unfortunately everything we do is constrained in some way by one of these boxes that we've been squeezed into and brought up through. So when somebody says to you, think out of the box, which box are they talking about? Don't think like your parents, don't think like your priest, don't think like your lecturer. And that's why I don't like that particular saying. I think it really just confuses people, and it also makes the assumption that it's like a switch. Well, let's be creative, because normally what happens in a company, the boss says, I think we should have a creative planning session. Let's have a brainstorming session, which means for 3 hours a year, you're allowed to be intelligent. You're allowed to think, okay? And what utter rubbish. And then what happens to make it worse, the boss knows that most of you are going to be too scared or intimidated to actually make any comment. So he prepares his idea, okay? So he says, anybody got any ideas? And everyone looks at everybody else. Nobody says or does anything. So, well, let me try and kickstart this. He puts his idea on the table. If you do happen to have somebody in the audience that does have an idea, he invariably crushes it pretty quickly because he hasn't had time to think about it. He doesn't know how to deal with it. So the first thing he does is say, well, we'll come back to that, okay? And then at the end of the 3-hour session, you must all go back to the office, and tomorrow you must come in and just be another mindless slave. Now, when you start to look at companies that have tried, there are companies that have tried to be innovative. In South Africa, there's a company called Discovery Insurance. Now, their strategy is that every manager has a budget. And if you see something wrong, you can, if it's within your budget to fix it, you can fix it. Now, that's a great approach, but the problem with that is that it's really limiting you to what we call step change. Tiny little steps. It's a sort of what they call total quality management approach. Now, the problem with total quality management is it is innovative in the sense you're fixing these little things with the long-term view of making things perfect. But we don't want perfect. We want to make things disruptively change. We want to see those big steps, because it's those big steps. This previous example was the creepy crawly. There's a major step change, a major disruptive change between that and what we used to do before. If we had gone step by step, we'd have somebody with a pole with 2 brushes on, okay? Doesn't really make a major impact on our lives. But to me, one of the greatest companies for disruptive change, where it's entrenched and institutionalized, is 3M. Most of you have heard stories about 3M and how great they are. But what makes them great is the fact that they have a simple rule. Every division, every department has to generate 20% of their turnover every year from new products. Now think about how challenging that is. It sounds easy, but to me that must be the best place on the planet to be able to work. You don't have anybody telling you what you can't do. There are no rules. The only rule you have is 20% must come from new products. And I think that's a very, very empowering opportunity to introduce disruptive change. And they make it incentivized for you from a range of different perspectives, because what they also do is they say to you, if your ideas are great, we'll give you all the budget necessary and you'll be part of the team. Too often when we're asking people to be innovative, it's so that some other clever people with MBAs can take it and run with it and you can sit and watch them from the side. And this is a fantastic opportunity to actually be part of the overall process. So, how do we get people to be innovative and creative? I know it sounds stupid, but we need to get people to read. If I go around the audience, and I often do, if I said to you that if you read the local newspaper, which comes out every day, that counts as 1. If you read the Sunday Times every weekend, that counts as 1. When I ask people, how many different sources of stuff do you read? Generally, the average in an audience is something like 2 to 5. Okay? I'm saying to you that if you're reading 2 to 5, you're never going to be innovative or creative. You should be reading a minimum of at least 50 different sources. Now, where a lot of people make the mistake as well is that they often will read industry magazines. So let's assume they're in paint manufacturing. They'll read every trade journal, magazine, anything they can. But what they're forgetting is that they're reading history. There's a professor from Harvard called Michael Porter who talks about a first mover advantage. When you're reading an industry magazine for the industry you work within, you can guarantee that you're reading history. You're reading about your demise. You're not reading about your competitors aren't saying, well, hey guys, here's a whole list of opportunities for you to get ahead of us. Okay? Doesn't work like that. The fact is that most innovation comes across from other industries. So, for example, going back to the paint example, if you were in the paint manufacturing industry and you wanted to get ahead, an opportunity might lie within the whole supply chain management. Who are you going to go and ask? Your competitor? No. Go and ask the specialist, DHL. And it's those kind of cross-sectoral, cross-industry interchanges that make it possible for you to bring innovation into another industry. It's like, imagine me trying to start a women's fashion magazine, okay? Yeah, you can laugh, but it's about that crazy. But that's how most people run their businesses, and for that matter, their lives. We have to start to read a lot more. We have to understand that it's by reading so broadly. And even if business isn't your key interest, you need to look at what business is doing, because business impacts on our lives and we impact on business. And it's up to us to understand that interface and to understand how we impact on each other if we're going to make a difference to our lives. One of the things I'm a strong believer in is, with this reading, is to look at things like Springwise. Springwise is a great website because what it does is it showcases all the latest businesses that are really, really innovative. Okay? So you're not going to read about another hardware store, paint shop, any of the traditional stuff. It's always going to be really interesting stuff, very cool stuff that you're not going to see quite often in this country. It's a fantastically good website to actually just see innovation being implemented. Trend Hunter is a different kind of site. They update with what they consider to be new trends that are developing, something like every 15 minutes. Okay. Why do I think it's important? Well, I think for those of you who've done a bit of marketing, they talk about trends, something that's going to continue for more than a year. If we're not looking at the trends, and if we're not watching them, and we're not reading to identify what those trends are, how will we be able to innovate and be creative going forward? These are the kind of websites that help you to see what's going on. One of the problems we have as human beings is that we don't always understand how the brain itself works. And I'm a strong believer that a lot of the brain processing we need to get done gets done while we're asleep. But you need to help. You need to help by identifying the patterns that are going on in your head, or what's going on around you. And it's by reading and looking at this kind of website which will help you to understand what's going on, what the patterns are that are developing. I've been very fortunate to get in ahead of the game on two by looking and identifying patterns. The first, and this will indicate just how old I am, was I was selling computers before the IBM PC was even invented. Okay. And I'm not joking. I started selling what we used to call Japples. Those were Taiwanese rip-offs of the Apple. Okay. So we were selling those in 1982 together with BBCs and Spectrums. We could see it coming. So by the time the IBM PC came on the market, we were ready. And the second one I was lucky enough to get and identify was the internet. I started an ISP in 1995 as one of the first in the country. And I can remember my competitors coming to an exhibition where I was demonstrating internet and telling me what a fool I was. And a year later, they were queuing up to buy my business. Okay. That's where the advantage comes, is by being ahead of the game. And the only way you can do that is to see those patterns in advance. The lady spoke earlier about music. This is a song by Pink Floyd called Time. The last line of the first verse says, waiting for someone or something to show you the way. Too many of us. I know I basically only stopped partying around 30. I was also waiting for somebody to show me the way. It's almost like because you're young, you don't have any idea. You're not supposed to be taking the lead. I don't agree with that anymore. And then there's the next verse where it says, no one told you when to run, you missed the starting gun. Again, I think it's so critically important that that doesn't happen to you. I see too many people who've done that. And just to tell you, I've bought every year when I get students, I give them this. Okay? My kids get this every quarter. It's like a newsletter. I think the people in this audience today, you are our future. You have to start and take control, because basically we've screwed it up deluxe. Okay? I really believe that it's up to you people to take your new kind of thinking and start being creative. Don't let your parents and your bosses stick you into these boxes. For once and for all, please crush those boxes and throw them out the window.